In the studio, Colonel in the Reserves, Reuven Ben-Shalom, an associate at the International Institute for Counterterror. Reuven, thanks for staying with us. I want to jump first to Washington. Matthew RJ Brodsky is a Middle East and geopolitical analyst at Wikistrat, joining us from our studios there. Matthew, great to have you back.
Good to be with you.
So I just want to start off with you on the notion of the U.S. and Russia as partners in brokering peace. Traditionally, the U.S. and Russia have opposing stances on one of the biggest issues, on Bashar al-Assad. Do you think that has changed in month 7 of the Trump presidency?
That's a really good question. Where Assad is going to end up in the end of this situation, it appears to be a card that the United States and the Trump administration is holding on to. It's a negotiating card that they can play at the end. From the United States perspective, it appears that they understand from Iran they need to have Assad in power. And obviously, they're not a part of the ceasefire agreement. From Russia's perspective, they would certainly prefer to have Assad in power. But that's not necessarily as strong of an issue for them as it is for Iran. So in the end, that might be a card worth played in addition to a lot of other negotiating cards that still need to be done. This ceasefire agreement is really a good sign and a good start, but there's a lot to be worked out in the meantime.
Matthew, you point to the long-term interests a little bit in what you're saying. Would you say that any one of these partial ceasefires, including this one brokered by the U.S., Russia, and Jordan, is a way for the countries involved to lay out their influence after the war?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I had a meeting a little over a week ago with senior administration officials who are very much aware, I believe, in this administration, certainly more so than the last, that basically where you're positioned on the ground is going to determine your position at the negotiating table in the future. So that's a major difference. So who carves out what positions and what zones now will make a big difference in the future.
All right, I want to ask you about that for the Trump administration in a moment. But Reuven, let's talk Israel, because that is a factor for Israel as well. The country was reportedly involved in some level of discussions in this deal. What does that long-term plan mean for Israel?
Well, first, Israel is always involved in these issues, even though when it's declared, of course, it was United States, Russia, and Jordan. They don't mention Israel. Israel is always there in the background, always promoting our interests through our close collaboration with the United States and our close coordination with Russia. As far as our interests, first and foremost, as Israelis, we want the Syrian people to stop dying, stop being killed, of course. But on the strategic level, the most important thing is what is going to be our border in 10 years, in 20 years. Will this be an Iranian-backed Hezbollah with a duplication of the Lebanese border, and when we are daily challenged there? That's the question, and our government is saying pretty clear, no, we're not going to accept it. So even if the ceasefire comes in to tomorrow and everything's quiet, we cannot accept a buildup of Hezbollah on the border.
So does that concern you that Russia, a very close ally of Iran, has a big hand in this ceasefire? Does that concern Israel over Iran's presence on the border?
What concerns us, I think, is this shallow view of ceasefire, quiet, stability, wonderful. And that's not wonderful. It means nothing as far as what's going to happen in the next day. And also, what do we expect? That because the two presidents, by the way, waited for this G20 summit to declare it, of course, for their own political reasons, what do we think? That now, all of a sudden, the Assad regime and all factions are going to stop firing and saying, okay, we're happy with where we are. No, that's absolutely not what's going to happen. Don't forget there were also several attempts on the pact that fell apart, so all this really means nothing.
Right. Unfortunately, these countries to think that this is solely in the interest of the safety of the Syrian people has proven itself not to be true. Matthew, if we're looking at the future, back to what you were saying about all of these countries involved in a ceasefire actually carving out what their future is going to look like in Syria, do you think the Trump administration knows what it wants the American future to look like?
Yeah, and I think their national strategy, their national security strategy document that they've been working on for a while, and that will be out by the end of the year, they've said, will lay out their entire review of top to bottom on Iran policy. And that is something that they've really been following, though they haven't been speaking publicly about it. And that is really what the whole game is, and I believe they're aware of that, and I believe your other guest was getting to that as the crux of the issue. This is all about Iran and in the future. And when you're looking at southwestern Syria, Those are areas certainly where there's a ISIS brigade that's there going against Israel, but there's also the Iranian influence. And then further south along the border with Jordan is the Al-Tanf military outpost the U.S. has created. Jordan, Israel, the United States all want that to be free from Iranian forces, and that's very much key when it comes to preventing Iran from having a Shia land corridor. The administration is aware of that, and that's especially true when it comes to Israel now having more reports in your media that about the missile factories that the IRGC is creating in Lebanon.
Matthew,
preventing that from occurring is really important.
I just want to ask you briefly before we have to run out for a break. If Iran is such a big deal, if that is the priority, and we know the position that Trump has taken on Iran throughout his presidency, how does that line up with cooperating so closely with Russia in Syria, which is a close ally?
Well, they're going to end up having to cooperate and deal with Russia in the end. There's almost no scenario imaginable where the United States isn't, in the end, discussing with Russia. And then how that negotiation goes is there's a million different ways that it can happen.
All right.
We want to get Iran away from Russia.
Matthew Brodsky in Washington, Reuven Ben-Shalom. Thank you very much, both of you, for weighing in. An important note that the temporary ceasefires we see now are actually very long-term in many ways. We're going to go out for a quick break. When we're back, a corruption case in Israel heats up, a submarine deal, and 6 more people, some with close ties to Netanyahu, brought in for police questioning. Plus, Rwanda's president is in the Holy Land